Rain smeared the city into streaks of gray, neon signs trembling in puddles like broken promises. Inside a small roadside diner, the air smelled of grease, burnt coffee, and exhaustion. Grace moved between tables with practiced quiet, her apron stained, her shoulders tired, her smile still intact. She didn't notice the laughter at first, just another group killing time. Then the bottle tipped. Brown soda splashed across her uniform, fizzing cold, sticky. The room froze. Someone laughed too loud. Someone filmed. Grace stood there, soaked, humiliated, unaware that this small, cruel moment was about to wake something far darker than any of them imagined. Before the story pulls you further in, let me ask, where are you watching from right now? Different streets, different lives, yet somehow we meet here in the same moment. Share your city in the comments. It's strange how one story can travel farther than pain ever intended. Grace slowly set the tray down, hands trembling just enough to notice. The booth of three men leaned back, grinning, the empty Coca-Cola bottle rolling on the table like it had done nothing wrong. One of them wiped tears of laughter from his eyes. "Relax, sweetheart. It's just a joke," he said, the word joke sharp as glass. The diner's hum returned, forks scraping, a radio murmuring, but no one met her eyes. Not the couple by the window, not the old man nursing soup. Silence was cheaper than courage. She nodded once, not because she agreed, but because dignity sometimes hides in stillness. Grace walked to the back, each step heavy, soda dripping onto the cracked tiles. In the bathroom, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. She stared at herself in the mirror. Brown stains, red cheeks, eyes that refused to cry. "You're okay," she whispered. Bills didn't care about pride. Rent didn't care about tears. She scrubbed at the apron, knowing it wouldn't come clean. Grace hadn't always worked here. Years ago, she taught music to kids who believed in miracles. Then her mother got sick. Then the hospital bills came. Then life narrowed. The diner was supposed to be temporary. Somehow, temporary learned to stay. When she stepped back out, the men were louder. One flicked ice cubes at another. "Hey, Cola Queen," he called. Grace kept moving. She refilled water, delivered plates, absorbed looks that slid off her like rain. At the counter, Lily, the only co-worker who ever checked, leaned in. "You want me to say something?" Lily whispered. Grace shook her head. Trouble had a way of multiplying. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. One message. "Michael, running late. Be home soon." She exhaled. Michael always ran late. Construction projects, meetings that went long. He kissed her forehead every morning and asked if she'd eaten. He never talked about work. She never asked. Love, for them, was built on small mercies. The men asked for another round of sodas. Grace hesitated, then brought them. As she set the glasses down, one man leaned close. "Smile," he said softly like advice. The others snickered. Grace straightened. "Please don't," she replied, voice steady, eyes level. Something flickered, surprise, then irritation. "Touchy," another muttered. The bottle tipped again, just enough to splash her sleeve. Laughter exploded. A chair scraped back as the manager finally stirred. "Guys, that's enough," he said weakly. The men paid in crumpled bills and swaggered out, leaving a wet table and a room full of guilt. Grace cleaned in silence until her shift ended. Outside, the rain had slowed to a mist. She waited at the bus stop, cold creeping into her bones. Her phone buzzed again. Michael's name lit the screen. She almost told him everything. Almost. "I'm okay," she typed instead. If you were standing there, watching someone humiliated while the room stayed quiet, what would you have done? Be honest with yourself, then share below. And if this moment stirred something you couldn't put into words, tap like to say empathy still lives. The bus came late. Home was a small apartment with warm lights and a couch that sagged in the middle. Michael arrived after midnight, rain on his jacket, eyes tired but soft. He noticed the stained apron hanging by the door. "Long night?" he asked. Grace nodded. He wrapped her in a hug that smelled like rain and metal. She didn't tell him. Not yet. Some truths wait for the right breath. That night, Grace dreamed of spilled soda turning into ink, spreading across the city, writing names she didn't recognize. She woke before dawn, heart racing, the echo of laughter still ringing. She dressed for another shift, kissed Michael goodbye, and stepped back into the gray, unaware that the men from the diner were already telling the story their way, and that Michael, quiet and kind, carried a past that did not forgive humiliation lightly. Morning crept in quietly, the kind that didn't ask permission. Grace woke before the alarm, the ceiling fan ticking like a tired clock. She lay still, listening to Michael's breathing beside her, steady, grounded. He always slept like that, as if nothing could shake him. She envied it. In the kitchen, she made coffee too strong and stared out the window at the alley below, trash bags glistening from last night's rain. The world looked washed, but not clean. At the diner, the air felt different. Same smells, same chipped mugs, but whispers traveled faster than orders. Lily caught Grace by the elbow. "They posted it," she murmured. Grace's stomach dropped. "Posted what?" Lily showed her the phone. A short video. Brown soda splashing. Laughter. Grace's face frozen in surprise. The caption read, "Some people need to learn to smile." The comments burned. "Lighten up. It's just a joke. She should be grateful for tips." Grace handed the phone back, hands numb. She worked through the morning like a ghost, hearing her name carried by strangers who felt entitled to her humiliation. The manager pulled her aside near noon. "I don't want trouble," he said, eyes darting. "If this blows up corporate," Grace nodded before he finished. She always nodded. It was easier than explaining that trouble had already arrived. During a lull, Grace slipped into the storage room, sat on a crate, and pressed her forehead to her knees. She remembered being 10, fingers stiff on piano keys, her mother clapping offbeat and laughing. She remembered promises made in hospital hallways, whispered bargains with a future that never answered back. Life had taught her how to bend without breaking, but today the bend hurt. Have you ever had someone help you when no one else would? Right, yes. And tell me their name. Sometimes gratitude needs a place to land. Her phone buzzed again. "Michael, lunch?" She hesitated, then replied, "Can't. Busy." The lie tasted bitter. She didn't want his worry. She didn't want his questions. She didn't know which version of him would answer them. Across town, Michael sat in a glass-walled office overlooking traffic that never slept. Men waited when he entered, not because he was loud, but because he was precise. He'd built his life by learning when to listen and when to end conversations. A notification pinged on his phone. A clip. A diner. Grace. He watched once. Twice. His jaw tightened. Not with rage, worse, with recognition. He knew that kind of cruelty. He'd grown up inside it. He closed the video and stood. "Clear my afternoon," he said softly. No one argued. Back at the diner, the same men returned, emboldened by attention. They slid into the booth like they owned it. "Hey, internet famous," one called. Grace's hands shook as she poured water. "Please leave me alone," she said, barely audible. He leaned closer. "Smile," he whispered again. Lily stepped between them. "You're done here." The man laughed. "Or what?" The manager appeared, pale. "Guys, just please." They tipped their glasses in mock salute and stood, one brushing past Grace, soda sloshing dangerously. It didn't spill. This time, outside, a black sedan idled across the street, engine humming. Michael watched through the windshield as the men stumbled out, loud and careless. He memorized faces the way some people memorize prayers. He waited. Grace finished her shift with a knot in her chest. On the bus ride home, messages poured in, strangers offering sympathy, others piling on. She muted it all and stared at her reflection in the window, city lights sliding across her face like borrowed lives. At home, Michael cooked dinner. He didn't mention the video. He asked about her day in the gentle way he always did. Grace watched him move, calm, measured, and wondered how much she truly knew. When he touched her hand, she almost pulled away, then didn't. Some anchors feel heavier when storms gather. Later, after dishes and quiet, Michael stepped onto the balcony and made a call. His voice stayed low. "No," he said. "Not yet." He ended the call and looked back inside at Grace folding laundry, humming a tune she used to teach children. Something like Hope. That night, Grace finally told him. Not everything, just enough. The soda, the laughter, the video. Michael listened without interruption. When she finished, he kissed her knuckles. "I'm sorry," he said. "Not they'll pay. Now I'll fix it. Just sorry." It scared her more than anger would have. The city slept. Consequences did not. And somewhere between apology and action, a line was being drawn, quietly, deliberately, by a man who knew the cost of crossing it. The next day arrived without mercy. Gray clouds pressed low, as if the sky itself wanted to listen. Grace walked to the diner instead of taking the bus, needing the cold air to steady her thoughts. Every step echoed with the same question she couldn't answer. How did a moment become a mark? Inside, the diner buzzed louder than usual. Phones were everywhere. A teenager at the counter pointed, whispering. Grace felt it in her spine before she heard it. Her name, stretched thin by strangers. She tied her apron with a practiced knot and went to work, choosing motion over fear. A woman near the window waved her down. Mid-40s, tired eyes, hands rough with work. "I saw the video," the woman said softly. Grace braced herself. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. You didn't deserve that." She slid a folded bill across the table, far more than the check. Grace swallowed. "Thank you," she whispered. The woman smiled, small and brave. It was a crack of light. Moments later, a man scoffed as Grace refilled his coffee. "Internet famous, huh? Bet tips are good now." She didn't respond. She focused on the steam rising from the mug, the warmth against her palms. Lily caught her eye from across the room and gave a subtle nod. "I see you." Around noon, a delivery truck stalled out front, blocking the entrance. Tempers flared. Orders backed up. The manager barked instructions he didn't mean. Grace moved faster, steadier. She helped an elderly man find his cane, brought crayons to a restless child, wiped a spill before it spread. Kindness, she'd learned, could be a form of resistance. "Now it's your turn. Share one small good thing you did recently. Write it below so others remember that humanity still lives." Your story might light someone's path tonight. Across town, Michael sat with a man named Victor in a quiet cafe that served espresso strong enough to bruise the senses. Victor didn't ask why he'd been called. He never did. "You want names?" Victor asked. Michael nodded. "And restraint," Michael added. Victor raised an eyebrow. "That's new." Michael's gaze didn't waver. "It's necessary." Michael's life had been built on leverage and silence. He'd clawed his way out of childhood that taught him what power looked like when it laughed at pain. Grace was the line he'd drawn, without knowing it, between who he was and who he chose to be. He would not cross it lightly, but he would not let it be crossed at all. Back at the diner, the bell jingled. The men returned again, emboldened by attention that had followed them like applause. They took the same booth. One set his phone upright, recording openly now. "Say hi to your fans," he said. Grace stopped. The room went quiet in that way that feels staged, everyone waiting for someone else to act. She walked to the counter instead. "Manager," she said, voice clear, "I'm asking you to make them leave." The manager hesitated, eyes darting to the camera, to the door, to the ceiling, as if answers might drip down. "Guys," he said finally, "you've had enough." The men laughed. One stood, looming. "Or what?" The bell jingled again. Michael stepped inside. He didn't look dangerous. No raised voice. No swagger. Just a man in a dark jacket, rain damp, eyes steady. He took in the room, the phones, the booth. His gaze found Grace. Relief softened him for half a second. Then the mask returned. "Sit," he said to the man standing. Not loud. "Certain." The man scoffed. "Who are you?" Michael didn't answer. He placed his phone on the counter, screen lit with the paused video. "Delete it," he said. The laughter thinned. The men exchanged looks. "Make me." Michael leaned closer, voice low enough that only they heard. Names followed. Addresses, habits, debts. The color drained from faces. Phones disappeared. The video vanished. Chairs scraped back as the men left, suddenly sober, suddenly quiet. The diner exhaled. Grace stood frozen. "Michael." He turned to her, the mask on. "I'm here," he said. She searched his face, finding pieces she didn't recognize, and something solid beneath them. The manager stammered apologies. Customers clapped, unsure why. Lily wiped her eyes. Outside, rain began again, gentle this time. Michael took Grace's hands. "We'll talk," he said. "All of it." She nodded, heart pounding. Not with fear, but with the weight of truth approaching. Because protection had arrived. And with it, questions. And answers that would change how Grace saw the man she loved. And how the city would remember the kindness she refused to lose. They walked home instead of driving. Rain stitched the streets together, washing the sidewalks into mirrors. Grace kept glancing at Michael, at the calm set of his shoulders, the way people seemed to step aside without realizing why. The city felt different now, like a stage after the curtain lifts, familiar props rearranged into something truer. Inside the apartment, the quiet pressed in. Michael hung his jacket carefully, as if order could soften what came next. Grace sat at the kitchen table, fingers laced tight. "You scare them," she said, not accusing, observing. Michael poured water, slid the glass toward her. "They were already afraid," he replied. "They just didn't know it yet." She looked up. "Who are you?" The question trembled. Michael took a breath, long and deliberate. He sat across from her, palms open. "I grew up learning how not to be powerless," he said. "I learned fast. Too fast." He spoke of a father who vanished, of streets that raised him, of a world where respect was a currency paid in silence. "I left pieces behind," he continued, "but some pieces don't let go." Grace listened, heart thudding. He wasn't boasting. He wasn't hiding. He was laying down truth like a blade turned flat. "You're Mafia?" The word felt unreal in her mouth. Michael winced. "I'm not proud of the label. I'm proud of leaving the worst parts behind. I keep people safe now. I keep you safe." Her mind replayed moments, late nights, unasked questions, the way he noticed exits. It all aligned, frighteningly neat. "You threatened them," she said. "You could have hurt them." Michael shook his head. "No, I drew a boundary. There's a difference." He reached for her hand, stopped short. "If you want me gone, say it. I will go." Grace stood, pacing. The room felt smaller, then steadier. "I didn't ask for protection like that," she said. "I asked to be seen." Michael nodded. "Then let me listen." The rain softened outside, like applause fading. If that moment hit you hard, leave a red heart. Sometimes one little symbol says what our hearts can't. The next days rippled outward. The video disappeared, replaced by apologies that sounded practiced. The diner put up a sign, "Harassment won't be served here." Customers brought flowers. Tips grew heavier. Grace accepted none of it as victory. She wanted meaning, not spectacle. At work, a young man approached her table, eyes down. "I laughed," he said. "I shouldn't have." Grace studied him, then nodded once. "Don't do it again," she replied. Forgiveness, she realized, didn't have to be loud. Michael kept his distance from the diner. He called less. When he did, he asked permission before stepping closer, physically, emotionally. It mattered. Grace felt her fear untangle into something usable. Trust, maybe, or the blueprint of it. One evening, Lily invited Grace to a community meeting. A local school wanted to start a music program. Funding had fallen through. Grace listened as parents spoke about kids who needed somewhere to put their noise. She thought of pianos and small hands. She raised her hand. "I can help," she said. The room warmed. Michael watched from the back, unseen. He made a call later, not to threaten, but to donate anonymously. Old power, new purpose. It surprised him how much lighter it felt. At home, Grace placed a hand over his on the couch. "I'm not leaving," she said quietly. "But we don't lie anymore." Michael nodded. Relief passed through him like dawn. "Never again," he promised. The city kept moving. The men stayed away. The diner buzzed with something like pride. Grace began teaching again, 2 nights a week, folding music into small lives. Michael learned to be present without being ominous. Love, they discovered, could be strong without being sharp. Still, the question lingered. What to do with hurt once it's exposed? Grace found her answer not in revenge, but in choosing who she would be next. And as the rain finally cleared, a brighter day waited. One that would ask them both to decide whether forgiveness could be stronger than fear. The city shifted again, not loudly, but with intention. Sunlight returned in cautious pieces, warming sidewalks and softening faces. Grace felt it in her walk to work, in the way strangers nodded now instead of stared. The diner felt safer, but safety carried its own weight. It asked questions. It demanded choices. Grace's music classes grew fast. Children filled the small room with noise that felt like healing. Missed notes, brave beginnings. One boy stayed late every night, fingers hovering over the keys as if afraid to touch something good. "It's okay," Grace told him gently. "The piano won't break." He pressed a key, smiled. Something inside Grace loosened. Michael watched these changes from a careful distance. He volunteered quietly, a shelter he'd once funded with guilt money. He cooked more, asked more, listened harder. Old habits tugged at him like gravity, but he resisted. Power was easy. Patience was not. Then the letter came. It arrived at the diner first, addressed to Grace, no return name. Inside, a single sheet of paper. "We want to apologize. In person." A number scrawled at the bottom. Grace's hands went cold. Lily hovered. "You don't have to," she said. Grace folded the paper slowly. "I know," she replied, "but I might." That night, she told Michael. He went still. "I won't come," he said immediately. "Unless you ask." Grace studied him, searching for shadows. "I want to go alone," she said. Michael nodded, pain flickering across his face. "Then let me wait nearby." She agreed. The meeting place was neutral, a community center with peeling paint and plastic chairs. The three men sat together, smaller than Grace remembered. No phones, no laughter. One spoke first, voice thin. "We were wrong." Another stared at the floor. The third cleared his throat. We didn't think it would matter." Grace listened. She didn't interrupt. She thought of soda fizzing against her skin, of nights she couldn't sleep. She thought of Michael's restraint, of children learning to play. When they finished, the room fell hollow. "Be honest. Could you forgive after what they did? Type forgive if you could, or never if it would break you too deeply." Grace stood. "I accept your apology," she said. Their heads snapped up. "But forgiveness isn't a favor you collect. It's a responsibility you carry." She met each gaze. "Do better. For the next person." She left without shaking hands. Outside, Michael waited across the street, hands in pockets. She crossed him, heart pounding. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "I think so." He didn't ask what was said. He wrapped his jacket around her shoulders and let the silence speak. The city didn't erupt. No headlines followed. That felt right. Healing, Grace realized, rarely trended. Weeks passed. The diner hosted a fundraiser for the music program. Lily laughed louder than usual. The manager learned to stand straighter. Grace played piano while kids sang off-key, and people cried for reasons they didn't explain. Michael attended, seated in the back, clapping softly. He felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest, pride without possession. Grace caught his eye and smiled, the kind of smile that didn't ask for protection. Later, walking home, Grace squeezed his hand. "Thank you," she said, "for choosing restraint." Michael exhaled. "Thank you," he replied, "for choosing me." The city hummed around them, ordinary and precious. Hurt hadn't vanished. It had been transformed, shaped into something that could teach. And as they turned the corner, lights glowing ahead, Grace understood that redemption wasn't a single act. It was a practice, one brave decision at a time. Autumn arrived gently, painting the city in quieter colors. Leaves skittered along sidewalks like secrets finally free to move on. Grace felt lighter, still careful, but no longer bracing for impact. The diner settled into a new rhythm. Regulars learned her name. New faces learned the rules. Respect, once demanded, now simply existed. On a Thursday evening, a small boy from her music class tugged her sleeve. "Miss Grace," he said, eyes bright. "I played for my mom." He held up a crooked drawing of a piano and 3 stick figures holding hands. Grace knelt, throat tight. "That's wonderful," she whispered. The boy ran off, laughter trailing like a song's last note. Michael stood by the door, watching. He'd changed without announcing it. No sudden miracles, just steady choices. He closed accounts that tied him to old obligations. He hired people who believed in exits that led forward. When temptation came, he let it pass. When fear knocked, he answered with honesty. One night, as they cooked together, Grace broke the comfortable quiet. "Do you miss it?" she asked. Michael paused, knife hovering over the cutting board. "Sometimes," he admitted, "power feels simple. Love doesn't." He met her eyes. "But love is better." She smiled, and the room warmed. The city tested them once more, not with cruelty, but with opportunity. A local paper ran a piece about the music program. Grace was interviewed, her words careful and clear. She spoke about dignity, about how kindness multiplies when given room. She didn't mention the soda. She didn't mention fear. She mentioned children learning to listen to themselves and each other. Donations followed. So did expectations. Grace felt the pressure creep in. Michael noticed. He took over grocery runs, left notes in her bag, sat beside her during late-night planning, silent but present. Love, she learned again, could be an anchor without becoming a chain. At the diner, a young waitress spilled coffee on a customer. The room held its breath. The customer waved it off, smiling. "It happens," she said. Grace caught Lily's eye. They both exhaled. One evening, Grace and Michael walked the long way home, the city breathing around them. Street musicians played under a flickering light. Grace stopped to listen. She dropped a bill into the open case. Michael followed suit. The musician nodded, grateful. The song swelled, hopeful and imperfect. If you believe love still wins, comment amen. Let's fill the space with hope. Maybe someone scrolling right now needs to see it. They stood there, hands intertwined, listening. Grace felt the arc of it, the pain that had sharpened her, the revelation that had steadied them both, the redemption that now asked to be lived daily. Michael squeezed her hand. "I'm proud of you," he said. Grace leaned into him. "I'm proud of us." At home, they planned a small recital. Kids would play. Parents would clap too loud. The city would keep moving. It felt enough. Yet Grace knew endings were choices, not destinations. Tomorrow would ask again. And again. She was ready. Because hope, once practiced, becomes habit. And habits, when shared, can change a room, then a street, then a life. The recital night arrived wrapped in nerves and cheap folding chairs. The community center smelled like dust and fresh paint, the kind of place where beginnings felt possible because nothing pretended to be perfect. Parents filed in with phones ready, smiles fragile with hope. Grace stood backstage, straightening sheet music with hands that remembered every wrong note she'd ever played. Michael hovered near the exit, where he always felt most useful. He watched Grace breathe, watched the kids line up, small shoulders squared, courage borrowed from the woman who'd told them it was okay to try. The lights dimmed. Applause rippled. Grace stepped forward and nodded to the first child. Music filled the room, uneven, earnest, alive. A girl missed a cue and laughed. The room laughed with her. A boy closed his eyes and played too fast, then slowed, finding the melody like a path through trees. Grace felt tears prick. This was it. This was the answer to a spilled bottle and a cruel laugh. Not erasure, transformation. In the third row, a familiar face froze Grace mid-breath. One of the men, the quietest one. He sat alone, hands folded, eyes fixed on the stage. Grace's chest tightened. She played on, fingers steady. After the final chord, applause surged, warm and messy. Kids bowed too deep. Parents cried without hiding it. The man waited until the room thinned. He approached slowly, stopping at a respectful distance. "I didn't know," he said, "about this." Grace nodded. "Most people don't." He swallowed. "I volunteer at the shelter now. I'm trying." She studied him, then gestured to the piano. "Sit," she said. He hesitated, then did. She pointed to a simple scale. "Play." He did, clumsy, insincere. Grace smiled once. "Keep trying." Outside, Michael watched the exchange through the glass, heart steady. He didn't intervene. He trusted her. Later, as they stacked chairs and packed instruments, a woman approached Grace with a trembling smile. "My daughter hasn't slept since her father left," she said. Tonight she did. Grace held the woman's hands. "Music listens," she replied. On the walk home, the city felt generous. Streetlights hummed. Windows glowed. Grace leaned into Michael's shoulder. "I'm tired," she said. He kissed her hair. "Good tired," he replied. At the apartment, Grace paused at the door. "There's one thing left," she said. Michael waited. She turned to him, eyes clear. "I don't want to be known for what was done to me." He nodded. "Then you won't be." She smiled. "I want to be known for what I chose." They stood there, the weight of it settling, not heavy but real. The past hadn't disappeared. It had found its place. If this story moved you, don't scroll past quietly. Tap like, "Not for me, but for the soul who carried this pain and still stayed kind." One click can be your way of saying, "I felt you." Grace unlocked the door. Tomorrow would come with ordinary challenges, burnt toast, late buses, off-key rehearsals. She welcomed it. Ordinary meant safe. Ordinary meant room to grow. And as they stepped inside, the city exhaled with them, ready for the final, gentle truth that waits when courage becomes habit. Morning arrived soft and unremarkable, the way real endings prefer to do. Sunlight slipped through the curtains and settled on the piano bench by the window, dust motes dancing like they had something to celebrate. Grace woke before Michael and sat there quietly, fingers resting on cool wood. She didn't play. She listened to the city breathing, to her own steady pulse. Peace, she realized, wasn't loud. It was permission to rest. At the diner, life moved on in its ordinary miracles. Coffee brewed. Plates clinked. A couple argued gently over pancakes and made up before the check arrived. Grace worked with an ease she hadn't felt in years. When a new hire dropped a tray, Grace knelt beside her, helped gather the pieces. "It's okay," she said, meaning it. The girl smiled through tears. The room didn't laugh. It helped. Michael spent his days building things that didn't require fear to stand. He hired from a neighborhood, paid on time. He declined invitations that once would have flattered him. Old associates tested boundaries. He kept them firm and calm. Power, he learned, didn't vanish when set down. It transformed into trust when shared. The music program expanded into a second room. Grace taught patience as much as notes. She taught kids to wait for each other, to listen between sounds. Parents lingered after class, talking about jobs and hopes and hard weeks. A community took shape without asking permission. One afternoon, Grace received a message from the woman at the window, the one who'd apologized on that first hard day. "Thank you," it read. "I stood up for someone today." Grace closed her eyes and smiled. Ripples, she thought. This is how they travel. That evening, Grace and Michael cooked together, laughing at burnt edges and imperfect timing. "Do you ever wish it never happened?" Grace asked. Michael considered. "Sometimes," he said, "but then we wouldn't be here." She nodded. The truth felt complete without being cruel. They walked after dinner, the long way, as they liked to do. The diner glowed behind them, a small square of light in a wide city. Grace stopped, watching people through the window, ordinary lives intersecting. "I used to think dignity was something people gave you," she said. "I know better now." Michael squeezed her hand. "You kept it," he replied. "That's harder." At home, Grace pinned a child's drawing to the fridge. A piano, 3 stick figures holding hands. She smiled at it like a promise. Michael wrapped his arms around her from behind. "Whatever comes next," he said, "we choose it together." She leaned back into him. "Together," she echoed. The city outside kept its rhythm. Sirens far off, laughter nearer, the low hum of something always becoming. Grace felt no need to watch it closely anymore. She trusted herself inside it. If there's a moral here, it isn't about vengeance dressed as justice or power mistaken for safety. It's simpler and harder. Cruelty shrinks when it's denied an audience. Kindness grows when it's practiced, even when it costs. Dignity isn't loud, but it endures. Love doesn't erase scars. It teaches us how to live with them, honestly and whole. Grace turned off the light. In the quiet, the piano waited, not for perfection, but for hands willing to try again tomorrow.